Section 1.3 on page 5 talks about collecting sample data. So we're looking at the different types of data that we collect. Observational study. This means there's no intervention. Researchers have no control. The researcher has no control, or researchers have no control. Study that looks at data that has already been collected or as it occurs naturally. Something like observing, nesting habitat or nesting habits of eagles in a forest. Now normally those are less expensive because you're not doing much, you're just observing. You can't claim causation. You can't say, well, this happened because of this, because this is natural, only association. Now, designated experimental study. This would be intervention. Researchers or research has control. Study that applies some treatment and then proceeds to observe its effect on individuals. Here, controls unknown variable, whatever it is that you're trying to measure. It costs more, and sometimes it's unethical depending on what you're doing. So for example, the polio vaccine was treated in the early 1950s. Was treated in the early 1950s by giving some children the vaccine and holding it from other children and seeing how does that affect. So that's normally how it works. So observational, there's retrospective. This one looks backwards to collect data from the past. Cross-section analyzes data from a specific point in time. And prospective follows similar individuals over a period of time who have certain factors that differ. Example, determine which type of observational study is shown below. A random sample of waitresses is taken who vary with how much they smoke per day to test the difference in lung cancer between heavy smokers, moderate smokers, and non-smokers. So we're not going backwards, and we are not analyzing data from specific point in time. Instead, we are following individuals over a period of time to see the difference between those. So this will be perspective. If I look at, that's observational. If I look at the experimental, there are three types. Completely randomized, randomize who gets treatment or placebo, randomized block from different groups of blocks, and within each block you randomize. And matched pair, subjects are blocked and then paired with those who have similar characteristics. Here's an example. We try to identify which type is that. Determine which type of experimental study is shown below. A clinical trial of Lipitor treatment is being planned to determine whether it's effective on diastolic blood pressure are different for men versus women. Well, for men versus women, that's really form different groups of blocks, and within each block randomized. That will be a randomized block. Now, random sampling, this is a very important word, random. Regardless of whether or not researchers decides to use an observational study or designate experiment, a sample group needs to be chosen to best represent the population. You want a sample in which you could with confidence say this represents the entire population. The best way to choose the sample is to randomly select individuals to stay unbiased. Definition. What a random sample is: members from the population are selected in such a way that each individual member in the population has an equal chance of being selected. An example, a random sample of 100 households. A simple random sample, a sample of n subjects, is selected in such a way that every possible sample of the same size and has the same chance of being chosen. Something like put all names in a box and choose 5 of them. Continuing on. So, example, randomly sample 6 of the following companies for a survey on a profit margins. Well, what you want to do this randomly. So what you could do, you could use a random number generator. The 6 randomly sampled companies are, well, you could call this company if you wish. You could number them from 1 and what you could do, you could use Google random number generator. You could say choose between 1 and 14 randomly, kind of like when you shuffle the songs on your phone, and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the numbers could be anything, it could be 13, 9, 1, 7, and 2. Maybe 5. That's one way of doing it. So you want to do this random, in which the chance of every company in there has the same chance of being selected. Systematic sampling. Select some starting point and then select every kth element in the population. For something like this, you could roll a die if you wish to get a random number. say you roll a 4. Then choose fourth person and repeat. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. These are the people you're choosing randomly. There they are. There is stratified sampling. Subdivide the population into at least 2 different subgroups, 1, 2 groups, that share the same characteristic, then draw a random sample from each subgroup proportional to the population. So in this case, I look at this, I could choose 3 from the first, because they're all women, and 3 of the second in any order, and those are the men. Now, cluster sampling. Divide the population area into sections or clusters, then randomly select some of those clusters. Now choose all members of the selected cluster. So what we could do, we could take a state and we could break the state into counties. So we could separate a state like California into counties. Then we could survey everyone from 4 randomly selected counties. So if I break it into counties, I could choose, say, 1, 2, 3, 4. There you go. That would be cluster. And convenience sampling uses results that are easy to get. Something very simple like stand outside a grocery store and ask those who walk by their favorite brand of detergent. And that concludes section 1.3.